Well, good morning, everyone. How are you all doing today? Welcome to the program. And we have an interesting program today. I have a couple of guests coming on this show to talk about the current situation here in China, I will say. Um, hmm, why have I got my Reportify Media tag on there when I'm in Chongqing? I don't know, but I will change that. Don't you worry about that. I just want to say a special hello to Ken. Thank you for arriving, Ken. Nice to see you. And yeah, and all the new people that have subscribed to our channel here lately, much appreciated, really. The weather is a bit chilly here in Chongqing. I'm adjusting to it. Healthy, though, that's the good news. And the beautiful thing is, some of the guests that we have coming on the program today are from other regions in China, so we can kind of fill you guys in on what is actually happening here as well in Chongqing and the rest of China. Hello, Arif. Good to see you back. Polly, great to see you on here as well. And we're streaming on the iChongqing channel and the Bridge News channel as well. So if you haven't subscribed to that other channel, please do so. I have Jerry coming on the program as well today. He's a really great guy. I've met him actually in person a few months ago, and it's been quite amazing what's been going on here in China in the last couple of weeks. And we're going to get back into the details. But let me just kind of give you my observation on what I've been experiencing here in the city. Now, as you know, China has relaxed a lot of its COVID measures, but this wasn't really a surprise to a lot of us living here, especially a lot of us that are connected and pay attention to the media. The central government did put out a 20-point plan months ago on relaxing some of the measures to transition, not completely stop any responsibility, but to transition responsibilities more onto us, the citizens, and us, the residents, and us, the expats of this country, to take responsibility, to educate ourselves, to also pay attention and pay attention. Actually, what a lot of us have come to learn over the last few years is that this government here has definitely saved millions of people's lives. Now, of course, there's going to be other countries and other people that might say, how can that be? How can you say that has saved many people's lives? Well, let's look at the numbers to start with. If we look at the start of the pandemic, we know that initially, right off the start, that it was a pretty potent virus. It was, infecting a lot of people, killing a lot of people as well. And many countries to be prepared for it, I would say were kind of unprepared. And it caused a lot of mayhem in hospitals. I remember watching a documentary recently about New York, what happened in the New York area between, I guess it was March and June of 2020. Absolutely catastrophic, the amount of lives that were lost there. And this is a government in United States that did have time to prepare for this. But still, that's no excuse to put blame on anyone, because maybe some countries just either A, didn't believe it was this potent, or B, didn't believe the science and thought it could just be treated like a cold, or C, maybe didn't have the resources for it. Now, another documentary I want to point into your direction is 76 Days. It's a documentary that was the early days of what was going on here in China. Now, after you see that documentary, you should have a very vivid view on how the Chinese view this pandemic. They take it quite serious. The government took it quite serious from day one. They invested in a contact tracing app. They invested in testing. This testing has cost billions of dollars to keep people safe over the last 3 years. And we are talking a lot of testing. I can go on my phone right now and give you an idea of probably in the last year here, I've probably been tested anywhere from 50 to 70 times. Now, at first, I was kind of wondering, what does that really mean? Am I getting tested? Why am I getting tested all the time? I feel great. I'm okay. Felt quite safe walking around here. Didn't know anyone that had COVID at the time. And it's really kind of uh, it's really kind of hard to vision um, being in two different situations. One I was in Thailand, where the government there basically said, "Let it rip, no responsibility." I saw some horrific things. I saw massive lockdowns, and these lockdowns were lasting 6, 7, 8 months at a time. Businesses completely shuttered. Even alcohol bans going into effect in Thailand, curfews going into effect in Thailand. And I've gone over other countries that I've looked at lockdowns, because when the arrow is pointed at China, people say, "Well, look what they did. They locked down people." All you have to do is look at Australia for an example. They actually locked their own country from their own citizens for almost 2 years. Yes, this has been catastrophic throughout the world. Over 186 other countries had failed COVID prevention measures. But we have learned a lot from the last 3 years, and that is keeping people safe, using the tools here in China, the contact tracing apps, the massive testing, and the COVID measures have actually bought people time, bought the elderly time, the vulnerable people time in a situation that is what is needed. In the 3 years, vaccination was found. Some of the COVID strains weakened. Now, the one that's ripping through China right now is, we believe, the Omicron B7, something like that. It's the 5.2.1, but the short form B7. Now, it has a spreader rate between 10 to 18. And what that means is, for each person infected, 10 to 18 other people can be infected. And that's quite fast. So the interesting thing is that this strain that's going through China right now is much weaker than the original one 3 years ago. Absolutely. There are going to be people that are getting sick. I know a few people that are getting sick now. And of course, we may see some rise in deaths. Now, the government and a lot of the municipalities here were very clear over the last 3 years on the COVID pandemic measures. If you lived in China, you were very aware of it. Most of the economy continued to operate domestically. Most of it did. For most part, my time here in Chongqing, it was quite good. The issue is when, as of November, we finally had I'll call it the most serious type of lockdown here in Chongqing. And using that measure lockdown is kind of deceiving in a way, because it depends on how severe it is. Now, we could say COVID prevention. That might be a little bit better to understand, because some districts in some cities may be isolated, not necessarily locked down. I was still allowed to go in my house, get groceries for most of the time, except maybe a 5 to 7 day range where they said, "No, listen, we'll get the groceries delivered to you," because cases are rising. So we understood that. Fadi, I will talk about that later. Thank you for mentioning that. We have an exclusive interview coming up with that a little bit later. But if you want to know more information about that, you can email me, okay? And I just want to say hello to Kevin. Thanks for joining. So as we continue into this conversation, no one ever felt that China is going to be able to stamp out 100% zero COVID. But the dynamic zero COVID policy was a strategy to buy time. Now, you might say, well, everyone's eventually going to get it. Well, that's kind of, in a way, a little bit selfish, because if China was to adopt that mentality from the start, we would have had about, let's go on estimates like we see in the United States, for example, or Italy. Let's go on estimates that we would have seen anywhere from 4 to 6 million people die in China. And the government here is not, that is a number that they were not willing to accept. Did they sacrifice the economy? Yes, of course. Domestically, some small businesses have been hurt, but we've seen that globally. We saw globally, even with companies and countries that decided to stay open during the pandemic, or have very weak response or strategies. That to me really resonated when I was living in Thailand. I saw it with my own eyes, and that market has still not recovered. I think it's going to at least need 10 years to recover. So many people are infected. The hospital system broke down. I remember, you watch my live streams. I was driving around on motorcycles, seeing people lined up all over the place. I drove past hospitals with people outside the hospital on hospital beds. They were even erecting tents under bridges because there was no rooms in the hospital. It's absolutely a test of humanity and a test of our governments around the world on what they've done. Now, here's the interesting strategy that China took 3 years. And we saw some uprising here in some of the cities here in Beijing. And the government said, okay, we're going to open up. We're going to drop the measures. Now, of course, the Western media says, wow, China listened to the people that were upset and they opened up. Okay, well, isn't that what you want to see if people are unhappy that the government responds? But no, they go on the offensive. Oh, now China is going to suffer because they're not prepared. Well, I'm not necessarily saying that I agree with that either, because the government has educated the people that live in this country on how to deal with it. And now it's handing off, we'll call it handing off the baton, and saying to the people, we've taught you what we can teach you. We've educated you. We've vaccinated you. The ones that wanted vaccine. There's no mandatory vaccination here in China. It's not mandatory. We've educated you what kind of masks to wear if you want to. We've educated about temperature control, about travel, how to do it properly, how to be responsible if you're sick, how to quarantine, how to take medicine for it, what medicine to take for it, as well as getting your elderly vaccinated if they do so wish. So now we're seeing cases rise when the restrictions are off. That is no surprise here. But that also proves categorically, without a shadow of a doubt, that the COVID prevention methods that were used here in China were very, very successful. Because the second that the government pulled off those restrictions, the cases started to rise. And that right there says to me, wait a moment, that's right. What the government was doing here, and I'll tell you, if you looked back at 2 months ago, 3 months ago, I didn't know anyone that had COVID in this city or in China alone. And I mean, I heard a comment the other day from another YouTuber that says, boy, if you had COVID about a year ago, you'd probably make the news. But yeah, that's where we're going with this. And I'm going to bring on a couple of people onto the show here and to talk about their experience. Let's see some of these comments here. Unless I'm one of the asymptomatics, I've never had a COVID and never been so healthy as I have been since the start of the pandemic. To be honest with you, it's like when the pandemic came in, I started to really notice that I didn't know anyone coughing or anything for quite a while. It seemed like the flu had disappeared as well. And, this is a good analysis. Soft landing. I think that is, Holly, thanks for that. That is a very interesting comment. Can you guys hear me okay, by the way? I didn't even test my microphone. Okay, so let's have a look here. If compared to the States, China would be around 8 million. US is at about 1.9 million. I'm not sure if that figure is correct. I thought it was 1.1 million, but maybe it is up there. BH, wow, Alex, double take. Not sure what that means. Let's talk about the Sinovac. Sinovac is effective 63 or 67%. China is working on a intranasal vaccine that looks good. The Sinovac, I have Sinovac or Sinopharm. I can't remember what it is. It's one of them. I've had 2 shots. I'm going to be getting a booster soon. It's not part of the mRNA family of drugs that are coming out of the United States. It's seemingly being quite effective. Now, of course, both sides will dispute what is better, what is not. But for most part, people are getting through this. They're getting symptoms, of course, or it's high fever, sore throat, the typical COVID symptoms. Some people lose their taste. But for most part, this country a few weeks ago, as the mother has flown the bird's nest, the child must fly and survive on its own now. And that's what the government has basically educated its population to do. Now, they've also opened up fever clinics in case that is needed. And there are plenty of those throughout the country. The country is well prepared for this, we'll call it soft landing. Well prepared, maybe even too prepared. But I'm hoping, and I hope that this soft landing is, of course, going to be just that, a soft landing. That all depends on what kind of strains are going on around the world. I see that other countries are currently going through peaks again. It is flu season in most of the Western Hemisphere, and people are getting sick. So let's hope everybody stays healthy. Ken here has got, I've had 4 shots, including the latest bivariant. Hopefully I can avoid it since I'm 70. Ken, we hope so too as well. I believe my mom is on her 3rd or 4th shot. I can't remember, but yeah. So I have a couple of guests coming on the program. I'm just going to see if I can find where he is. I'll bring, Jerry's going to be probably 5 minutes early. He's on in about 20 minutes. There's a doctor that's on YouTube that is very, I believe he calls himself a doctor, but I'm going to read you his bio. And he has a lot of very interesting things. His name is Dr. John Campbell. And Dr. Campbell has some very, very interesting analysis of the Chinese vaccination. Now, this guy is not, he's pretty balanced, okay? He's not going to come out there and say, hey, the Chinese did it 100% right. He's going to compare what he feels is important. Let me see if I can bring up a little bit of what he has to say. And I'm just going to add it to the stream here. Bear with me, everyone. Let me just see if I can get this on here. And it's important. And I suggest you guys watch his videos because this guy, I can give you, where I would just say, read his bio so that you know who and what and, where his education is from and all that kind of stuff. He's a pretty smart guy. He doesn't claim to be 100% right all the time, but he's been pretty accurate during this. But let's have a listen to hear what he has to say.
With the mRNA vaccines we have in the West, vaccines that work in a completely different
He's talking
way
about the Chinese vaccinations.
Two completely different approaches to vaccination. Now, the Sinopharm efficacy, according to the World Health Organization, is a 79% relative risk reduction in preventing infection and hospitalization. The Pfizer original paper claimed a 95% relative risk reduction, and later analysis have shown that this gives an absolute risk reduction of 0.84% protection against infection during the period of the trial. Although, to be fair, this did soar to 3.7% protection in the 5 to 6 months after the trial. And we'll look at that in more detail. Interesting, though, this pandemic began with China, and now China is the last place where the pandemic is going to become endemic as we live with the virus. So lots of interesting detail in this. And just before we go on, we will look at the way that the Chinese give the vaccines. Another reason I'm not too concerned about the vaccination program in China. So here's, I think this one, I can't remember where this one was, but it's a Western one. So the vaccine goes in and straight in and no aspiration. Now, this nurse in China, she pops the needle in. This is in slow-mo. And then she aspirates to make sure she's not in a vessel. And only then does she inject it. So 2 different vaccines with 2 different approaches to vaccination. Let's get straight on to the detail now. So China, basically big changes all of a sudden. They're changing to live with the virus. This is the vice premier. China's entering a new situation. Virus ability to cause disease is weakened. Actually, my understanding is that the Omicron is less pathogenic, of course, than the previous variants, the Alpha and the Delta, for example.
So that is, if you want it from a perspective of, I believe he's quite educated in this stuff. He's been doing these videos, I think, for a few years. Very smart guy. Yes, as I said, Fadi, he can be somewhat controversial. But then again, we have to look at all types of information that we can get. There are some good stuff that he talks about and some good information. Like I said, take it as much as you want to take it. Yes. So yes, he does have some. I'm seeing some comments from here. He's got vids from the 90s on his channel, I think. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. Okay, but it's good to get at least some type of we'll call it research. Okay, because he does do his research, and he doesn't go out there and say that this is what you should 100% do, but. Yeah, it's quite interesting. You guys can chat about it in the side chat there. But yeah, I thought it was quite something interesting to watch. That's for sure. Okay, so another person I've got coming on the program here is from Shenzhen, and he's going to be here soon. He's going to be in a location in Shenzhen, and we're going to chat with him to see what's going on down there. Yes, that doctor that I just showed, or I believe he's, can somebody actually put his bio up on the comment section so we can let you guys know what his qualifications are? That would be very helpful. Okay, let's have a look here. What else have we got? I'm just going through some other news updates that I wanted to tell you guys about the restrictions here in China. We have eliminated now what used to be a very useful application. Kind of sad to see it, because it kind of, you get used to these apps on your phone. Actually, it's disappeared. Okay. I'm looking into my most recent apps. It used to be our travel application. And I guess I was happy to see that application because I would be traveling when I opened it, or it would be kind of in holiday season. Well, anyway, the government has got rid of that as well. So we don't see that being used as well. And that's another thing that shows that things are loosening up here. Now, another thing that I wanted to bring up that we notice here is the testing stations have really disappeared quite a bit. I see a lot of movement to the rapid antigen test. There it is here. There's Campbell's, nurse educator, Dr. John Campbell. There it is there. Okay, so yes, really interesting guy to watch. Some stuff you're going to agree with, some you're not going to agree with. Some might be out there, and some might be very, very helpful. But it's always good to get some commentary on things. Anyway, back to this vaccination and these COVID prevention measures here. We see an uptick in vaccinations here in the elderly. That is good news. We think that it's going to take probably, and I'm hearing this from various news outlets, that some of the peaks in the cities here of infection could be the first or second week in January, where they feel, I guess it's the yield curve is going to taper down. But there is a big drive on getting the elderly vaccinated. Okay, so how do we stay safe? Well, we stay safe by, continually wearing masks. Some of you may agree or disagree on that, but that is up to the individual. The other thing is that having rapid antigen tests is going to be very helpful for people that are either currently sick or have a fever, that they can quickly test to see if they should go into work or they should just stay at home and home quarantine. We have seen a lot of this mandatory quarantine disappear unless you're sick. Most of the advice has been to stay home and get well. And some of the people that I've been talking to that have caught COVID have said that, some of it has raised their temperatures. They've had a sore throat, the symptoms that most other people have had. So the other points is, now, where does that bring us in this country opening? And that's what I'm going to ask a couple of the guests that are coming on the show here in about 10 minutes, is what is this going to do to China to open up? And I think that this is a very clear indication. There has been no official word on it yet. We do see the restrictions in Hong Kong being, lowered by the week. Again, Macau seems to be pretty open as well. Taiwan seems to be quite open as well. And as these measures become more acceptable here domestically, I think we are going to see the domestic market, at least the travel market, start to take off here very quick. And maybe in time, actually, for the holidays that are coming up here, New Year's and stuff like that, Chinese holidays coming up here in January. So I think we're going to see a surge in travel. I don't think, now this is just me speculating, I don't think that there are going to be many regulations put in at that time of season. Now that is a massive, massive migration, okay? We are talking anywhere from, I've heard numbers as many as 500 to 600 million people, maybe more. Maybe lower numbers during this pandemic. Maybe people are still concerned to travel, but that's how many people get on trains, planes, automobiles, and go visit their families, whether it's factories that usually shut down during that time. Maybe some factories might stay open to get the supply chains back to where they need to be. Some companies here are experiencing some of their workers being sick. That's why if you see a couple of shops that aren't open in the shopping mall, that either means the staff maybe is sick, or maybe they have a fever and they're not really wanting to go into work in case they can spread it. I'm going to bring someone on to the program here. I don't know if you can hear me backstage there, but he's getting all set up. He's in Shenzhen. Wow, the weather looks fantastic there. Hopefully I can see him there, but let's just bring him on the program here and let's get him on there. Hello, can you hear me, sir?
Good morning.
Good morning to you. Wow, the weather looks fantastic. Tell the viewers where you are.
I'm in Shenzhen, on the outskirts of Shenzhen, actually, and it's actually 11 degrees So it's like winter here in Shenzhen.
Wow. It looks like a beautiful blue sky behind you there.
Yes, it's nice.
Oh, fantastic.
I think that makes it colder, doesn't it?
Well, you would know that better than I am because you're in one of the fantastic parts. You guys got palm trees down there, don't you?
Yes, we do.
So tell us a little bit about you and maybe how long you've been in China. And thank you for coming on the program today. And our audience has been waiting for you. Tell us what's happening, maybe some changes in the city in the last few weeks. That would be really helpful to the audience.
Okay, I'm going to get out of the sun here, so I don't need the sunglasses. The changes have been kind of a roller coaster. I think I noted that before on my my own channel. I was doing a couple of videos talking about the changes, and what I noticed is that, you know, before where it was pretty constant as far as people avoiding foreigners.
Okay.
I kind of went away for a little while, but it seems to have come back.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. And what do you think is fueling that? What do you think's fueling that?
Well, you know what? Now it's a little strange because I think people are avoiding everyone, but maybe foreigners a little more.
Okay, that's interesting, huh? That's very interesting. I don't think I've experienced that yet because still I don't see our shopping malls here at capacity right now. I think a lot of people are still kind of staying away from the shopping malls, playing it safe for the most part. Are you seeing that there as well?
No, it's actually, I'm noticing that basically the shopping is just about getting back to normal.
Okay.
But everyone's wearing masks, right?
Right. And what part of how long have you been in China?
About 12 years.
So 12 years. So you've been here from the start of this pandemic to now, huh? Have you left at all or?
No, I haven't left during the pandemic. No.
Oh, wow. Okay. So boy, that's so do you feel that this is the end? Are we getting near the end of this?
One could only hope, you know, during the first year, I would often tell friends, you know, I hate wearing the mask and I hope the mask ends soon. And here we are 3 years later, you know, so I really can't take even a guess. It seems like here in Shenzhen, they're pretty much accepting the new changes.
Right. Do you feel the people down there, what, now that, you know, before you came on the show, I was explaining to the audience that it's kind of like mother bird has said to baby bird, hey, you wanted to fly, you're going to fly now. And here's what we've taught you how to fly. And here's how we prepared you how to fly. Do you think the average Chinese person understands now that the responsibility is now on them?
I don't know. Maybe I'm a sympathizer, I guess, to some extent, where I don't really believe in that. I believe in like I saw some videos. There's one channel, Lay's. Have you heard of that? Lay's Let's Talk or something it is?
Yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
You know, I saw it first. She seemed like pretty knowledgeable, but then after a couple of videos I saw where she's saying, you know, that the COVID-0 won't end because Emperor Xi isn't going to stop it and all this. And then I thought to myself, well, you know what? He's got advisors. He's got scientists. He's got all this. So I'm sure that came into play as well. Right.
So
I don't think it's just like, oh, you people wanted this, have it and see what happens.
Yeah, I think what I mean by that comment is that I think eventually, I don't even want to use this term, but it kind of describes it the best, that China had to jump. We had to jump to take this next step. And we can't stay under this policy all the time. But then again, if we look at the preparations for what one of our viewers said, a soft landing, I think, you know, if this country opened up and followed what a lot of these other countries did 3 years ago, that you could take 5 to 6 million people off the population of this country. And there would be a horrendous amount of people with, you know, a lot of long-term COVID damage. So the time, I believe, that the government has bought here has saved lives. Yes, the economy is being battered a bit by it, but coming out of that, I think that a soft landing is hopefully the outcome that everybody wants. And I think, do you think now is the time?
I don't agree. I agree with most of what you said. You know, I can only say what I see here in Shenzhen, and
Right.
in Shenzhen, things are, I think, going along pretty well. I mean, some things are a little confused still. For example, the testing, you can still get your free test, but you're going to have to walk farther for it. I mean, unless the one that's still open is near your home.
Okay.
But, you know, I can still get a free test today. I got one 2 days ago, and it was about 2 kilometers from my home, where before it was, you know, hundreds of meters. So that's
Now,
changed.
Can you still use your application? It will update on your application if you're negative or positive?
Yes, it updates still like about 9 hours, somewhere between
Okay.
6 and 9 hours after your test.
Because I know in Thailand, when I used to get the test, there was no phone application. You had to go in there, fill out manually with paper. Then they would call you, and then you'd have to go back, pick up the paper, and be told if you were negative and positive. That's what was going on in Thailand. So, but here you can still use your phone, right?
Yes, it updates on the phone still. But I can tell you something that's related to what you just said, though.
Please do. Yes.
If you go to the hospital, okay, so you need a test. You know, somebody's in the hospital. You want to see them,
Right.
You know, or you're bringing someone to the hospital. You haven't had a test for a while. You can get a test at the hospital for, I don't know, like 50 cents US or something like that. And it's on paper.
Okay.
You know, they're going to give you a certificate that you can go into the hospital with. And if you're positive, I don't think it updates, but if you're negative, it does, which is unusual.
I see. Okay, well, that's interesting. I mean, we've had some reports that countries still do tests. I know Thailand's tests for the nucleic acid test, NET, I believe it is still about $120 per test in that country. That's what it was costing me, I believe, and my wife was even higher to get these. And yeah, so that was the cost for them. Yeah. Have you been vaccinated, if you don't mind answering?
Yeah, I've had a couple of vaccines. I haven't had one this year, but I have had two doses.
And the Chinese vaccinations, correct?
Yes, the Sinovac.
Okay. Yeah, I've had.
From what I heard, I don't know. There's that one doctor online that everybody goes to, Dr. John somebody.
Yeah.
And he says actually on the first dose of the Chinese vaccine, it's not as good as the Western. The second one, it's coming closer, but the third one is better. If you get 3, it's better than the Western vaccines.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know that. I'm going to have to search for that story and share it with our viewers as well.
That's data that he was sharing. It's
really?
not his opinion. He was sharing data that showed that. Yeah.
Oh, though that's very reassuring here. Have you seen the communities there in Shenzhen? I mean, what do you? Are people going back out into the streets now? Are they still kind of worried? Are they still concerned?
More people are wearing masks. And I'd say, you know, it was unusual because Saturday night there was less people out than usual, but that's because it was so damn cold.
Right.
You know, Sunday night, last night it was like a normal, you know, evening out on, let's say, on a walking street on a Busheng Jie.
Yeah.
They had, you know, all the, you know, how they have the street vendors and whatnot. They're all out there. People are all out there. They're doing business. They're doing good. Everything's going well, except more people are wearing masks.
Right.
Except you get the odd person that, to me, it kind of pisses me off that they get in my elevator without a mask.
Okay. I get that.
Sometimes
I
I'll
get
ask
it.
them to put it on.
You know, I get that. And I completely understand that. Or maybe somebody's coughing away. I mean, coughing is very impolite nowadays to be doing it in public without a mask on and stuff like that.
Yeah, or tell me if you ever, I see this on the subway sometimes, you know, somebody's wearing the mask.
Right.
And they're like,
okay.
Chew. You know, it's like I feel like carrying a box of Kleenex and handing them a tissue because, you know, I don't care if you cough into your mask or you sneeze into your mask, but use a tissue or cover your hand or something, right? Don't spread it on everybody on the subway.
We still have a little ways to go with a few people.
Yeah. Well, that's strange. To me, that's strange. Why are you wearing a mask?
Yeah. Do you know any friends that have caught COVID locally?
I've never met anybody, and I don't know anybody that's ever had COVID.
Has since these reduced, I guess, policies here, the 20-point plan, since it's been brought in, have you noticed an uptick in cases in Shenzhen, or is there an uptick in cases in Shenzhen right now?
Well, they claim that there is, but the thing is that nobody's getting tested now, right? So how would they possibly know? And if you are sick, what you're doing is you're staying home. Let's say you get a normal flu or a cold, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to stay home at this point because you're going to think, well, maybe I got the COVID. I don't want to go and get a test in case, you know, maybe I'm going to get quarantined or something. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't even think they have the quarantines anymore.
Yeah, I think they've pretty much dwindled a lot of that down. I mean, it's there for the serious cases for sure, and the hospitals and the fever clinics are ready to accept people. That is something the government has definitely invested in. And wow, they have spent a colossal amount of money on testing its citizens throughout these 3 years. Before I let you go, there's a couple more things I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind. Okay. The holidays that are coming up. Are we going to see a surge, finally, a massive surge in travel? I know last year was quite muted, and the year before that was quite muted. Do you plan on going away during these holidays this year?
I might. Typically I go to Heilongjiang, which is kind of stupid to go to in the winter, but typically I go to like Harbin area or something, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
But you know, I think it depends on what happens between now and then. If it continues as it's going right now, I think we're going to be back to basically, you know, fairly normal here shortly, especially if they open the border.
Oh, wouldn't that be interesting, huh?
Well, they opened it to Hong Kong. If you go to Hong Kong from anywhere in the world now, it's open. No quarantine.
Okay, that's good news. That is good news. Any chance that you're going to come up to Chongqing?
I've never been to Chongqing. I think I would like to, and I could lose a few kilograms. So I've heard they have a lot of hills there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I look forward to whenever you can get some time to come up to Chongqing. We will definitely take you around the spots and show you everything that we can on us, of course. And I want you to do a few videos with me as well. Tell the viewers about your channel and how they can find you on YouTube.
I got the Wu Jiao channel, which basically is the paper version of Wu Mao. And I didn't pick it to be like the opposite of Wu Mao or to be called a Wu Mao or anything like that. It's basically, I mean, my idea was that it's the closest thing to 2 cents. And this is like my 2 cents worth, or my channel. Okay. It's like my 2 cents worth, right? That's in Chinese money. That's the closest to 2 cents is the Wu Jiao, right?
Right. And what type of videos can people find on your channel?
I try to do basically just observations of what I see in China. Or actually, when I travel, I still make videos usually. But if they're looking for it, just look for the.
There it is. Yeah.
Here, Wu Jiao.
Wow.
You can see on the money there. This is the pinyin here, wherever it is. Yeah, the pinyin on there. The Wu Jiao. You can look in the. I had to borrow this morning because I don't carry money anymore. I haven't carried money for like 3 years.
I was just going to ask you that. Where did you get that from? Because I haven't seen money either.
It's pristine. I can't fold it or anything. I can't wrinkle it, so it's not mine.
Oh, wow. Well, I got to tell you, I really appreciate you coming on the program today and sharing your experiences and what's going on down there in Shenzhen. It seems like brighter days are ahead, I think, for all of us here in China. And it's quite comforting to hear that you are still managing to go around the city, doing what you want to do, doing what you love in China. and also your friends are staying healthy as well. That's great news to hear, and I really appreciate that.
Well, then, other than the mask wearing, actually throughout the whole 3 years, hasn't affected me that much. I've done a lot of travel throughout China during the 3 years, and I did a couple of semesters at Shenzhen University during the 3 years. I mean, things got a little tight at Shenzhen. The schools are actually tighter than any other place in the city, as far as for virus, right?
Another very good point you made. Even though
Yeah.
China was closed to the international market, it was very much open domestically.
Yeah, the schools are crazy, though. They have their own rules. They have their own section of government, and they are more strict than anything else.
Are we seeing that being relaxed a bit?
Actually, I haven't been back there since the relaxation of the COVID-0, so I'm not sure. But when I was attending school there at Shenzhen University, it was extremely strict.
I can imagine.
No messing around. And you can't blame the security guards, the Bao-ans at the gates, right?
Right.
They're just following orders. They get told to do something, they do it, right? So,
well, I kind of felt bad for some of the security guards here in Chongqing lately because they've lost all that power.
Now you see them, right? They don't know what to do because they had a lot of power for a couple of years.
They had a lot of show us your code, log in, scan, let us take your temperature, please wear your mask, and they've lost it. So this morning as I was coming into work today, they do take our temperature still, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to bring them cookies tomorrow. I feel kind of bad in a way, but yeah.
That's one thing locally here that businesses can basically make their own rules. So there are still some places asking for 48-hour tests.
Okay.
And I think you probably know government offices, hospitals, and actually the odd one is the wet markets.
Interesting.
You need a 48-hour test to get in the wet market.
Yeah, we used to need a lot of the tests here. That is disappearing. And some of the ones, for example, I had to see an eye clinic last week. They provided me with a rapid antigen test on location for me to get in there. So the
wet market thing is actually included in the rules from the top, I think.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And the weird thing is, so I go to get a test a couple of days ago, and there was actually, when I went 4 days ago, because I was visiting government offices this week, right? So I went 4 days ago, I got one. There was 5 people in line in front of me. And then the other 2 days ago, there was maybe 60 people in front of me.
Wow.
And, you got to wonder, well, where are these people coming from? They're not students, right? So they're not from the schools. They're not, the government probably has their own testing, right? So where are they coming from? Well, they're the people that go shopping at the wet markets or work at the wet markets.
Yeah. And,
that's
we were experiencing the same too. Here, we saw a big surge of people that wanted to get tested when the government stopped the testing, or the municipalities or the communities stopped the testing. All of a sudden, we saw a big surge of people that wanted to get testing as well. It was amazing.
One other point I think you might find interesting.
Thank you. Tell us.
That 3 years after this thing started,
right?
This is BYD finally came out with a 4 RMB N95 mask. They just got these. I bought a bunch of them because when the virus started, I bought 4 N95 masks for 100 RMB each. And I never used them because they were so precious, right? They didn't.
Okay.
You think, well, where do I use those precious masks, right? And I used always the really cheap masks all the time, right? I saved my 100 RMB masks. I ended up giving them away to some family. But now you can buy them by the box from BYD. There's a pretty good quality mask, and they're 4 RMB now. That's about 80 cents, I think, US.
Okay.
So
top line.
That's a pretty good deal. And like I say, it's N95.
Well, that is some good advice. So I will hit the shops looking for some of those soon.
Yeah, check that out. They're a little different color. They actually originally they have the 2 straps around the head,
right?
And they're too tight. So what you can do is you can cut them, and then tie the top and the bottom together, and then you can put them around your ears.
Ah, fantastic. Ah,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Keep
Well,
that in mind
hey,
if you do find some.
thanks again for joining the program today. And our viewers, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe to Wu Jiao's channel there. It's great content. And I look forward to eventually meeting you, because we have been in discussion on some projects that we're going to work on. That would be great. And I hope that comes to fruition in the future. Well, it's certainly nice to be connected to Shenzhen today. Lovely, beautiful blue sky down there. I wish you a health and very safe, healthy week ahead for you. And we will chat with you soon, okay?
I appreciate the shout out for the channel. And this is you're actually breaking my cherry, my live stream. I've never been on a live stream before. So this is I'm trying to figure out, which way you move the camera here to be in the middle. So it's all new to me, even connecting. So this is, I appreciate getting me on here.
Well, you're doing really well.
Doing another one with you sometime.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. All right, you take care. Have a great day, and stay safe.
Other people coming up, or should I? Got other.
I got Jerry's take on China. He's coming on to the program right now. You want to stick around for a few minutes?
Well, that's worth watching. I'd rather watch you and Jerry talk. So. I'm not nearly as knowledgeable as he is. So.
Okay, so can you still see if I put you backstage? Can you still watch the show, or do you want to watch it on YouTube? Up to you.
Yeah, I'm going to flick over to YouTube.
All right, you take care. Thanks for joining the show today. All right, bye-bye.
Say hi to Jerry.
I will. Thanks. Well, there you guys go. I'm going to zoom in the camera now, because we're back to the main camera, and I'm bringing on a very special guest. He has a channel called Jerry's Take on China. I suggest that you subscribe to it even before we add him to the program today. Very knowledgeable guy. Met him in person here in Chongqing. Him and his lovely wife, a great gentleman, an absolutely fantastic person to bring on the program. And I wanted to get his really analysis of these big changes that have happened here in China over the last few weeks. Well, without further ado, we're going to bring Jerry onto the program. Jerry's Take on China. Thank you for joining. Hi.
Thanks for the invite, and what a great introduction.
My pleasure.
You will have to excuse this. You won't catch COVID through the microphone, but we are both of us here positive.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, interesting. Thank you for coming on the program. Maybe you can tell us where you are in China, if you don't mind, and maybe share this ordeal. To some people, it could be quite frightening. Yeah, it could be quite frightening to some people.
I wouldn't describe it as frightening. It's where I am in China. Let's start with the beginning. I'm literally, as the crow flies, probably 60 or 70 kilometers from David, your previous guest. Okay. And he's on the other side of the Pearl River. I'm in Zhongshan. So for people who don't know China very well, Hong Kong is on the northern side, and it's not quite north and south, but there's north and south, Hong Kong and Macau. Macau's on the south. Just go inside into mainland China. On the north, you go into Shenzhen. On the south, you go into Zhuhai. And then the next city is Zhongshan. So we're kind of across the water from Hong Kong and Shenzhen, not very far away at all. And I've both my wife and I tested positive this week. She got a phone call from her cousin. She was with her family last weekend, and she got a phone call from her cousin on Monday saying, I've tested positive for COVID. And so we both started to feel a little sore throat on Wednesday evening. So we went shopping and we got some medicine. Okay. And Thursday, we both woke up feeling a little unwell. We put our masks on, put the scarf around the outside because it is quite cool here now, so we can get away with that. And wandered down to the test center where we were tested. She was positive, I was negative. And then, so we isolated ourselves. It was quite clear that I had the same symptoms, but was tested negative. And I tweeted about it, actually. I put a couple of tweets on my on Twitter. And effectively what's happened is we've both woken up every morning feeling like a herd of elephants have stampeded over us. And within, for the last few days, each of us have felt better during the day. But today, this morning, my wife has woken up and said, "I really don't feel well." She's been vomiting this morning as well.
Oh my!
So she's gone back to bed, and so effectively, the only thing that's happened, I can say, is we have it's actually not as bad as many things that have happened to both of us before. Bit of a cough, as you can see. Right. Excuse me. It's feverish. It's not so bad. But here's the thing: 10 days ago, I can honestly say I didn't know anyone who has had COVID, and I didn't know anyone in China who knew anyone who had COVID. Now, I hardly know anyone who hasn't got it. It's that widespread now in Zhongshan. Almost everybody I know is now. I haven't been outside since Wednesday. When we had our test on Wednesday afternoon, we came home, kind of closed the door, and we've got enough food in the house. We can get deliveries. David says, "Get well soon." Thank you. So effectively, we're just locked in the home for a few days. We've got plenty of masks. We've got plenty of medicine. We've got antigen tests, and we're just going to test ourselves. We need to contact our local community. They contacted my wife when she tested positive and said, "You and your husband, the person you live with," because they know we live together, of course, "you and your husband need to separate different bedrooms, different bathrooms, blah, 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 and eat in different rooms." And we said, "Hang on, we live in a one-bedroom apartment." And it's all too late anyway. So the following day, we got some RATs delivered, some friends of ours. We're very, very lucky because they're very hard to get. I'll show you what this is.
I was going to ask you that.
Well, this is my rapid antigen test. I've got a bag of 20 of them now.
Wow. Okay.
Well, and this was great. We're involved with the charity, and someone donated a load of them to the charity. I mean, we're talking thousands to the charity. And I would love to help anybody who needs them. Unfortunately, I can't, because I expected the guy who we're involved with to deliver me a couple to help us out of this problem. And he delivered me 20. Now, of course, these are inside of a COVID zone. So we can't even help and say, "Well, we'll send some to you." We can't. So the charity can. And unfortunately, they're only dealing with Zhongshan. So if anyone's in Zhongshan contacts me, I could probably try and help them. But unfortunately, it's very difficult for me to send anything out. We have them, 20 or so of them. I've tested positive on one of these. And we're waiting now. The local community says, do a test on the 21st and another one on the 22nd. And if they're both clear, then you're in the clear. If they're not both clear until you have 2 days in a row, then we're not going to clear you out. So there is still some form of restriction at the community level here. But they actually did say to us, "Don't go out unless you need to." And I'm not sure what "need to go out" means. Do we need to go out to get some shopping? What we've done, we've had a couple of things delivered, and where they've been delivered, we've just asked, we live on the second floor, and we've just asked the driver to leave them on the ground floor. We'll go downstairs, pick them up. So I open the door, pick them up, and then come on in. And that's it.
I've just put a link up in the
I saw that.
comment box. I'm gonna just so the viewers can see it there. You can also see it in the chats here. I suggest everybody head over to Jerry's channel and subscribe. He's got some amazing content on there. I really enjoy it. It was a pleasure also to meet you in person a few months ago.
Yeah, it was nice. Yeah, we had a great hot pot, didn't we?
Yeah. Can you imagine somebody getting COVID back when we met? You'd almost make the news. I mean, it's...
Well, that was my point 10 days ago. I knew no one who had COVID. I knew no one who knew anyone who had COVID. And so when people say to me, "Oh, China's lying about these numbers," it couldn't possibly be lying. I know people in so many different places, and I've never, until 10 days ago or 12 days ago. In fact, it was last Sunday. Last Sunday, I met with a former student, and she said, "Oh, 10 kids in my school have got COVID." And I said, "Wow, what's happening?" "Well, the school's continuing to open." Well, And she contacted me 2 days ago and said, I can't go to school now because half the kids in my class have COVID, and there's 60 kids in her class. So 30 kids in her class alone have COVID. So it's now, I mean, it's not a big thing anymore. I was wondering whether I should even bother putting a tweet out. Everyone's got COVID. It's not a big thing. So yeah, the truth is, it's now. I would suspect we're going to go through this massive wave, and it must be millions of people now in China have COVID already. Must be, because it's happened so fast.
I was thinking about that, and I was trying to analyze what's going to happen. It's really unpredictable what is where, if this is even going to be a soft landing. But there's something for certain that I cannot dispute, at least on my understanding of this, is this government for 3 years has put a lot of attention on its people, spent billions of dollars on mass testing, big data, contact tracing apps, travel applications to keep people safe.
Yeah.
The moment that this was taken off, and we'll say the responsibility now lies on the people, but the moment that comes off, many people got infected. And that shows you that the time, and this is my understanding, and I'm not expecting everybody to agree with me on this, but it proves to me that the government, and my understanding on how the strategy was here, is time is important when you're dealing with this pandemic. We've managed to come up with vaccinations over this last 3 years. We've managed to understand this virus more. We understand that certain variants become weaker. We understand that if we can, trace where the hot spots are and maybe kind of contain it, that buys us more time to vaccinate maybe the elderly. But then when they and then you hear that everybody say, yeah, but they can't stay under this forever. But I think it's true. But I think these 3 years have saved lives, because
absolutely
now it shows you, now when the restrictions are all off, I know a lot of people that have caught COVID here too, that I didn't know anyone up until about 6-7 days ago. And now they're getting COVID, and okay, they're experiencing similar symptoms as you are. But it says to me, imagine if this government and its people didn't take the precautions they did and let this thing rip from day one. My, oh my, this would have been catastrophic for this country.
Yeah, there's been a few comments that I've seen. Do you think China wasted 3 years and the sacrifices that Chinese people made, blah, 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 blah. Most of the people saying this are not in China. First of all, let's be clear about this. Most of China was not locked down for most of the time. Wuhan, there was quite widespread lockdowns in 2020, January, February, March 2020, including Zhongshan, where I am. And we were locked down for about 7 weeks, but it was a limited lockdown. One of us was allowed out of the apartment for 3 hours every second day to go shopping. Zhong Nanshan, China's Dr. Fauci, he put out a press release on Friday last week, which said, if you can avoid getting COVID, avoid for as long as you can, because the longer you avoid it, the weaker it will become. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. What happened with the 3 years of lockdowns? There were not 3 years of lockdowns. You and I met in Chongqing.
Right. Of course,
that was July or August. It was early August, I think. I had come to Chongqing from Jiangsu, where I traveled. Shortly after I was in Chongqing, I went to Hainan. I spent June in Hunan. I was in Beijing. In the last 12 months, in the last 24 months, I've been to well over 40 cities, just traveling. Now, with some inconveniences, some restrictions, and some issues. Foreigners can't stay in this hotel, that kind of thing. My wife and I even cycled through Guangxi and up to the border of Guizhou for 7 weeks during March and April 2021, last year. And then in October, we went back last year to Guangxi to make a video with the Shanghai video crew. And then we went from there to Chengdu, where we spent some time. So there's no issues with traveling. We've been traveling. We've been quite free. There have been some restrictions, but there were no lockdowns. And the lockdowns happened in the last few weeks of the last few weeks. Yeah, literally the last few weeks. Of course, with the exception of what happened in Shanghai back in, I think, August, September, October. Shanghai was an exception because I think it wasn't handled very well. Now,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, here's the other thing, is every single prediction, projection, assumption about what China, how bad China is going to be, has proven to be wrong so far. Every single allegation that millions are dead, they're lying about their numbers, is proven to be wrong so far. And they're still doing it. We're still getting, oh, there are going to be another million dead. Well, yeah, that's possible. If China does everything the way that America does, or everything the way that Australia has done, then yeah, there may be. But they're not. They're doing things better. And there was only three factors. They had to get the vaccinations up. There's now more than 95%. Now, that sounds like a lot, but when 5% of the people are not vaccinated, that's still 700 million people. That's the population of Europe. So that's a big step. Not 700 million, sorry, 70 million people. The population of the UK. My apologies. My brain's not all that today. So wrong zero. 70 million people are still not vaccinated. Now, of those 70 million, probably 60 million of them are elderly, are vulnerable. They're the people that are being cared for and looked after. And in some cases, they will be isolated and looked after. So they needed to get the vaccine numbers up, and they're doing that now. They now there's a new inhalant vaccine, which is available now. Yep, it's available now. It's being given out in Guangzhou for sure, and it's not in tests. It's a real one. There are now mRNA vaccines available, but I've been booster shotted with the Sinovac, the traditional one. My wife is only double shotted, so that might be the difference. I'm a little bit better than she is today. So those vaccines had to be done. Therapeutics. Now, there's a load of things on the market already that relieve symptoms of fevers. They relieve the symptoms of colds. Just the standard Ganmao Ling and things like that. We are currently living every morning. I'll show you what we've got. I've got this. I prepared one earlier. We got a packet of this stuff, and anybody who knows China's medicinal systems will know what this is. It's basically a cold and flu treatment. One sachet of this in hot water, and it's great. I wake up every morning feeling, each morning for the last 5 mornings, I felt like I've been run over by a herd of elephants or something. I get up in the morning and I honestly felt like someone had hammered my hips closer together on the first day. It's like, oh, I got out of bed. Oh my God, this is terrible. And I have this thing. This is a Chinese traditional medicine painkiller. Now, what this is, it costs about 10 RMB, which is $1.50 US, less than $1.50 US. And you can see there are a few of them in there. And what this is, one sachet of this in a glass of warm water, first thing in the morning. 20 minutes later, I feel as right as rain. It's a painkiller. And I don't know what's in it, but I'm told it's Chinese traditional medicine.
Okay.
It's worked for me. Now, for the next I took one of these. I didn't get out of bed till 9:30 this morning. By 9:40, I had one of these inside of me. And by 9:50, I was feeling fine. I feel
fantastic.
Yeah. So this works. This is the sort of thing that I think is probably what we need to be aware of. Chinese therapeutics. So they needed vaccinations, they needed therapeutics, and they needed to know that the pathogenicity, is that the right word? I don't even know if that's the right word, but the strength of the virus has diminished. Now, according to Zhong Nanshan, it has. Now, here's my first criticism of what China has done. First criticism. And it is a real, genuine criticism. We had these protests a few weeks ago, and China suddenly said, screw it all, we'll open up. And everybody said, look what China has done. They've crumbled, they've weakened, they've fallen to the pressure. No, They hadn't. What they had done is they've taken a misstep, in my opinion. And this is what they should have done is said, okay, everybody back into your houses, stop, close, lock the doors, everybody slow down, because this is what we're going to do. Zhong Nanshan has done massive, team of Zhong Nanshan people have done massive testing, massive research, and they've released a paper. And that paper says that you need 25 times more Omicron than you do Delta to kill somebody. So it's that different. It is that much difference. Now, what he's found so far, people tell me that can't be right. They must be lying about the numbers. But last month, 150,000 people caught COVID inside Guangzhou. 150,000 people. Now, those 150,000 people are all still alive. And when they stopped reporting this on a daily basis, which was about a week ago, more than 130,000 of them had left any sort of care and gone back to their homes. So that means 20,000 people were still in some kind of care. Now, of those, one was in severe care, and 1 and 2 were in serious care. None were in critical care. So as of today, and we're now talking about 10 weeks into the COVID wave that hit Guangzhou a few weeks ago, we're 10 weeks down, no one has died. What does that tell us about the strength and the pathogen, the strength of this virus? What does that tell us about that? And it tells us that it is obviously weaker than it once was. And so people are saying to me, well, how can that happen when Australia is still experiencing a great number of deaths? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I do trust the science that China has done. If the same number of people in America or in Australia, percentage-wise, were dying in China, I'm fairly sure China would have said, here's a situation. We're not opening up. We're not going to do it. We're opening up now because we're ready to open up, and that's what they've done. So that's the way I view this now. I do trust the Chinese government. People say my glasses are rose-colored about it, but the fact is they've proven time and time again that all the naysayers, the doomsday predictors, are all wrong. China hasn't collapsed yet. China hasn't lost 1 million people. China hasn't lost anywhere near. China's lost less than Australia, which has a population the same as Shanghai. So
extraordinary.
It is. It really is. We're talking about one of the largest countries in the world with the largest population, and it has the lowest number of deaths recorded. People say, "Oh, they lie about that." If they're lying, you would know people. I would know people. We would know that they're lying about it, and we wouldn't be talking about it live on television or internet. We're not on television, are we?
Well, let me add to that. Now, I have a lot of media friends here, and in Chongqing, and there was a 20-point measure from the China's National Health Commission. I believe it was on the 10th or 11th of November. They put this notice out, and it was trying to kind of soft land this.
Yeah.
And what initially happened here in Chongqing is during that time where we were seeing other cities kind of adopting that strategy on, let's kind of move away from this. Let's prepare to open. Well, the opposite kind of happened. We went into a pretty severe COVID measures here. That word lockdown is not necessarily clear as what lockdown. I'll give you a lockdown. Lockdown in Thailand, where I lived, that was a good 9 months of no businesses open, period. Wow. Even alcohol bans, curfew bans. I think they had it as much as you were only allowed from 2:00 in the afternoon to 6:00. After that, if you're found in the street, you're hauled off to jail. That was Thailand. That's a lockdown. Inter-province traveling, no. My wife couldn't even visit her mom that was an hour and a half away. Couldn't do it. Road stops, you name it, it was blocked. Now, to me, I understand that perception of lockdown might be the same perception of people having here in China. Sure, there are communities that will isolate when there are spiked cases. Yes. Were we in a situation like that? Yes. But it was gradual. You knew that there was going to be an end for most part. Now,
Yeah.
some cities do it spectacularly great. Some do it not so great, and they get media attention. And some of it, criticism is rightfully deserved for that.
Yeah,
And I'm
there
sure
was some criticism at local level, and I think that was the problem because Shanghai is an international city. It's full of international journalists. A lot of journalists live in Shanghai, international, and Beijing too. And when something goes wrong, and this is what I found. Most of the things that did go wrong were very, very localized things. They weren't systemic problems. They weren't problems with the way the system was managed. And that was what caused a lot of people to have some kind of anger or angst against the government. And I get the angst. I mean, but the complaints were about a local issue, a personal inconvenience, in some cases more than an inconvenience, personal risk. And these things did cause a lot of got a lot of international coverage, which for the most part was quite unnecessary. And I think that most people got to the point where they said, we've had enough of this. And that's what these protests were. If you take a look at those protests, though, 90% of the people out there were just kind of curious onlookers with their cameras. Look what's happening here. Yeah.
So I kind of good camera angles too. If I need to show 1 million people at my subscriber meetings, I'm going to take the BBC lens for sure.
That's the one to take. That's right. Yeah.
But I understand I understand that the point that you're making. But then there's something that, I have to commend I've been in Chongqing for most of the time here. When I got to China, I've been to Chengdu a couple of times, but being in Chongqing here, for most part that I've been here over about a year and a half now, things have gone really well. We know when there was a spike, we knew that restrictions were happening. It wasn't the whole city. Sometimes it was only certain districts. Some was downtown area. Some was, the rural areas. But you could see an end always. They would keep you informed. Okay, here's the test. After 3 days, if we don't have any in this, you're back open. So you could always see light at the end of the tunnel. Yep. So there wasn't this, how many months is this going to go on? Now, this last one, it was a bit complicated, but we could see what was going on. But then there's something, I'm just reading a comment here. Okay, and it doesn't matter. Yeah. And then there's something that I have Chinese friends locally here that said to me, well, here, and this is what they don't seem to understand is outside these borders of China for the last 3 years is a very different world to what they think it is now. Because I was talking to my Chinese friends and they said, but all these other countries opened up. Everything's fine. Everything's great. I said, these economies have been battered. Inflation is running rampant in some of these countries, not necessarily connected to COVID. Some of it could be supply chains. But if you think that most of these countries have got through this unscathed, no, it was pretty tough times for a lot of countries out there.
I got a lot of criticism for the comments about the World Cup and the masks and things. I wrote an article about the fact that most people in China were okay with the lockdowns. You've got your Dawei troll in there, so he's
I'm watching.
I got a lot of comments about it. What seems to be an unknown factor with things like this, I think there might be another wave coming, and it's going to be even worse. The World Cup in Qatar is not going to just go away quietly. It's going to be one of those things that resurges again, and it could even get worse if I read an article that said there was a camel show aligned with the World Cup, and 30,000 camels were in Qatar as well. And MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, is active, and it is happening inside of Qatar. And there are people who are getting sick and going home And are they going home with MERS, or are they going home with some other form of SARS? Are they going home with coronavirus? What are they going home with? But they're going home sick. And what China has done, I heard you talking to Wu Jiao about the opening up, and we all hope it opens soon. China cannot open yet, not until that whole thing has settled down. And I think we really, really need to be very, very careful that there isn't something else out there that can come into China. And China needs to keep its borders completely sealed right now, with that quarantine remaining in place. Now, people don't like it. I don't like it. No one wants it. But the fact is, until we know what's going to happen as a result, I think we need to wait at least a month. It's not going to open before Chinese New Year, that's for certain. I've got a good bottle of wine on this with one of my subscribers. He reckons Chinese New Year. I reckon not till April or May. But I think we'll wait and see. And it may not even open next year. It may not open at all if something happens as a result of this, massive numbers of people coming into the Middle East and then going home, many of whom are going home unwell. If they're going home with the the COVID that we have, then that's not a big deal. They're going home with mostly flu-like, cold-like symptoms, and that's great. They'll get over it, and life will go on. But if they're going home with something more serious, I'm really worried about that.
Here's a point that, and thanks for that, Jerry. That was a very good point. It's good to get discussions going here in the chat, and I do want to bring up something about this word lockdown. It does show that some people are, very misinformed or lack the ability to understand what lockdowns are domestically, what lockdowns are internationally, and how countries cope with it. Just let me give you an example of countries that went through lockdowns. Buenos Aires, that city alone, went through a 236-day lockdown. Thailand went through 187 days of lockdown. And what I mean by lockdown is lockdown businesses completely. Airports closed. You could see my departure when I left the airport. The number one airport in Thailand, in Bangkok, that welcomed over 60 million people a year into that airport. On August of 2021, was one of only 50 people in that entire airport. Okay. When countries lock down, they have lockdown. To say that they haven't hurt their economy, they have decimated it. The amount of money that has been borrowed to get through this poorly orchestrated, poorly funded, poorly scripted in a way that they have not come up with a strategy to get through it. They let it rip. Millions of people have died. Yet when people say China's locked down, sure, internationally, the borders are locked down. Now, for tourism, yes. Business, you can apply for a visa. If you get accepted, you can come in. You must quarantine, and then you're allowed in the country. Jets are still landing here internationally. My wife arrived a few months ago. She followed the protocol. Yes, some people, they don't want to accept that. They say, well, we shouldn't have to accept going into quarantine. Then don't come to China. It's very simple.
The 20-point plan that you mentioned earlier on had a reduction in that. It reduced it. It was 14 days, then it went to 10 days. Now it's 5 days plus 3. And there's talk it's going to go to 0 days of quarantine and 3 days of home monitoring. I think that's probably just wishful thinking more than anything else. But what's more important about that is it went from 5 days to 3 days. It went from 10 days to 5 days. But if you are a very senior VIP, for example, the Chancellor of Germany came here. He entered China in a bubble. There is a bubble to allow people to enter, and it's closed loop management. So if senior business people want to come in, they can. They come in through this system. They were going to have to pay to have their meeting at the airport inside of a closed area. They come in, do what they need to do, meet with their people. Their people then have to be isolated, but they can then do that business that they need to do. So international leaders can come into a closed loop management system, the same way they did on a massive scale with the Winter Olympics. And that's probably the most important factor. So senior, important visitors can come in and are coming in, and they don't have to go through that quarantine process. Mm-hmm. So it is reopened. And at no stage, this is what people forget. At no stage did China close its exports. Now, way back in 2020, for the first month or so, there was a reduction in exports. And there were a couple of reductions in imports in many different countries because of their lockdowns, not China's lockdowns. China did not lock its ports. It kept its ports open. But when, for example, and I know this is true of Australia, when Australia locked itself down, they stopped importing things. So for a couple of months, their imports dropped. So did their exports. China's exports continued all the way through. Now, of course, there were some reductions to some countries because of those countries' lockdowns. But China is the only country that I know of in the world that has continued to grow its exports. Now, a lot of those exports now are PPE, vaccines, therapeutics, all the different things that are necessary for COVID. COVID has, in some respects, helped keep the GDP alive because the massive amounts of money spent in testing. Yeah. And you mentioned it before. I don't know how many billions, US dollars of many hundreds of billions have been spent. You mentioned the cost of the COVID test in Bangkok. We had to pay just last week when Anne and I, my wife, got tested. We had to pay 12 RMB 70. That's less than $2 US. It's less than $3 Australian dollars. It's less than £1.50. So that's how much we had to pay for a test. We both got our results. Mine came through on my phone. My wife's came through on her phone. Hers was, it didn't change her QR code. The test said positive and was red. What would have happened if the rest of the world had followed China's policy? We probably wouldn't be in this mess that we're in. That's exactly all I can say. It wouldn't have happened. None of this would have happened. They would have killed COVID dead like they killed SARS dead 20 years ago, 2003.
I think a lot more people would be alive. I think, and it's interesting that, I just had to put that comment up there because it kind of, it sets up on how some people are very misguided on the information that they get. This country continued to stay open during this pandemic and actually kept its supply chains open logistics wise to actually keep the world doing what it needs to do, feed its people. Whether it's food, it could be other, I mean, you name it. The exports did not slow down for a minute here at all.
When people say to me that I'm an Australian citizen and I talk about Australia a lot, which is inevitable. I spent 18 years living there. Yes. I'm not born Australian, but because my last 18 years before coming to China 18 years ago were in Australia, I tend to talk about Australia a lot. Now, people say to me, that's a lie, that's wrong. My answer to them is, go look at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trading. It's on DFAT online. Go look at the DFAT numbers. And you'll see that I'm right. Apart from 1 or 2 months during 2020, when trade figures were down to China, everything is up from China and to China. China is Australia's largest supplier. Australia is China's largest customer and supplier. Sorry, the other way around. China is Australia's largest supplier and largest customer. So they're doing two things. It's going both ways. And in every respect, it's going up. The idea that people say, yeah, China is holding Australia to ransom and not trading with us, it's all bullshit. It's not. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade numbers are Australia's numbers, not China's numbers. And by the way, if you're really worried about it, you should be if you're in Australia, because you do 60% of your exports to one country. That's something, sorry, it's not 60, 46% of your exports to one country. China does 2% of its exports to Australia. That's it. China can lose Australia as a customer and a supplier quite quickly. 2% of its imports come from Australia. 46% of Australia's come from here. So you've really got to start thinking whether or not you want to upset that customer. And the COVID thing was a big catalyst in doing that. So I think it's probably worth remembering that it's not my figures. I'm not talking about my own figures. It's not my numbers. When I say China is doing very, very well, I go looking at the other countries' figures, the receiving countries and the exporting countries. China's doing very, very well because of those things. It's those factors that seem to get forgotten about. And really, if you're in another country, any country, wherever you are, go look at your own country's trade figures with China and see what's happened. You'll see that they have grown. China never closed. China's never restricted its trade to you. It might have had some issues with some of those products, as in Australia, but it's never restricted the trade. I just wrote an article about the Australian coal. It is a fact. It's been proven now, and it was tabled in Australia's parliament, that Australia's coal is dirtier than Indonesia's coal. And China said this 3 years ago and stopped importing Australian coal for a period of time. It's now importing Australian coal again, but people say, oh, they banned our coal because of COVID. No, they didn't. They banned your coal because you lied about the quality of it. That's been a proven fact right now.
I mean, it's pretty interesting. Like, you know, I've seen members of my family go through a very tough year here in Canada. And I think a lot of that's got to do with geopolitical reasons, why the Canadian economy is in a mess. And some of my friends in Europe are really going through one hell of a winter over there with skyrocketing costs. But then again, at the end of the day, you have to look at, you know, these trade relationships. For as much rhetoric that comes out of America, China continues to supply that country with a tremendous amount of product. Yes,
could
Jerry.
you do something for me with this guy, Dawei? Remove him from this, because the first person to call me a liar when I've proven, and Andrew Wilkie, a member of Parliament, tabled the report in the Australian Parliament. I'm not the liar. You want to call me a liar? Prove I'm wrong. Don't just come out there and call me a liar. See, if you can remove that guy, that would be
all right. Thanks, Dawei, for coming. But you crossed the line. Okay. All right, Jerry.
He's doing nothing but insulting, and then saying, "Well, can you please discuss this?" Oh, get lost.
Disgruntled. He's disgruntled. Anyway, so yes, back to what I want to bring up here is, where do we go from this point now? Where do we move forward now that the government we're all hoping for a soft landing? You still think it's quite a bit of ways before we can start welcoming tourists into this country. I think that even if China says to its own citizens, okay, you're free to go travel, and coming back, even if the restrictions are lessened for, let's say, any quarantine, or let's say it's down to maybe even 2 or 3 days, I think most of the Chinese will be very reluctant to actually get on an airplane and actually leave China. I still think that there's this unsettling feeling.
Unsettling is probably a polite way of saying they're afraid. What happened 10 days? I don't know what. I've lost count of the days. A few days ago, China reopened internally and said, okay, all restrictions are gone now. You don't need your QR code. Well, you still need a green code you in some places, but you don't need the itinerary. All of the things that people said, these are going to be with us forever, have now gone. And what China did was it completely reopened. And immediately it reopened, and Mario Cavolo did a nice article on this the other day. Immediately China reopened, it locked itself down. People in China voluntarily said, well, I'm not going to go out because it's still a little dangerous out there. Now, the same thing will apply once China has hit the soft landing. I mean, we've got to get through this. And this is currently a massive wave of people catching COVID. Just the fact that almost everyone I know in Zhongshan has got COVID. And I haven't been mixing with them. It's not like I caught it in the same circles. My wife got it from her family, and they're 20 kilometers away. I've got friends who are in schools teaching, and their classes are disrupted. There's entirely different things happening here. So it's a massive wave. We've got to get through this wave. Once we get through this wave, we can say, okay, we either have herd immunity or we don't have herd immunity. If this thing starts to turn into something that starts killing people again, we can expect to go back into lockdown situations. These measures are not canceled, they're suspended. So we can expect that to happen if people start to die in numbers. Now, we do know, like with any disease, some people are going to die. I think that's an accepted understanding. Some people are going to die. But we've got to get through this first wave. Currently, and this is just a guess, there must be, just in Zhongshan here, there must be 1 million people affected. Must be. Because in Guangzhou, just a few days ago, I know for a fact there was 150,000, but I didn't know a single one of them. Now I know many people in Guangzhou who are infected. So that 150,000 must have multiplied by many times. So here in Guangdong, there are millions of people affected. I think the GBA has close to 100 million people. I thought it was 110, but I read the other day it was 86 million people in the Greater Bay Area. So maybe it's 110 if we include Macau and Hong Kong. So if we start to add those numbers together and we get through this without major problems, many people are able to move around freely, that nobody's dying, then I think that they can say, well, China is opening and it will open up. They've got to have the same thing in the rest of the world. They've got to have that. If people are still dying in Australia, if people are still dying in Canada, if people are still dying in America, then something different is happening there that is not happening here. And China is not going to accept that. China is not going to allow something different to come in. And it may be a different variant. It may be different, the vaccines, it may be the therapeutics, it may be the Chinese healthy lifestyle. I mean, Chinese people are generally healthier than American people, I know that, and Australians as well. Australia has a massive obesity problem, so does America. Those countries are still having a lot of deaths, percentage-wise. 1% of people dying is a lot of deaths. Now, you may say 99% surviving is perfect. No, it's not. 99.9% is still not perfect. It's better, but it's not perfect. Right. So China is not going to open up when 1% of people who get sick are going to die. Not when 100 million people are going to get sick in one area where I am, Greater Bay Area. If 100 million people get sick and 1% die, that's 1 million people here in Guangdong. It's not going to happen.
Let me add to your point. I did a live stream yesterday, and on the start of my live stream, I did some news clips about the NHS in the United Kingdom. Currently, right now, there are 7.2 million, I guess we'll call it waiting list for operations in the United Kingdom. Wow. Now, that's been shared by 4 or 5 news outlets, BBC, Sky News, the Daily Mail. Well, Daily Mail is kind of exaggerates sometimes, but that figure has been talked about in the Parliament as well. Now, when you see a health system under that much stress, we have to take into consideration that when encountering a pandemic on top of a waiting list like that, the care of people is, well, clearly been diminished, and that can also result in more people dying. I don't know if any people here, as Jerry talks about Australia, I talk about Canada.
I can talk about the UK too. The National Health Service has notoriously been underfunded for many, many years, particularly under Conservative governments. National Health Service was basically a socialist initiative way back around about the time of the Second World War, just after the Second World War. The National Health Service, before I was born, and I'm 64 years old, was created, and it's been notoriously underfunded, particularly by Conservative governments. Now, this is not me being political about one side or the other. Right. This is a fact. the Conservative government, even though they clap for the National Health Service on a regular basis and say how wonderful they all are, they reduce their pay and not reduce, but not increase their pay enough. So I have family who work I have two brothers who work inside the National Health Service, and one of my brothers, his entire family, almost his entire family, are inside. My oldest brother is a retired nurse, and he's been in that National Health Service for most of his working life. So I've got a big picture of the National Health Service. Now, they have always had waiting lists, long waiting lists for operations. What they're doing now is that the media are blaming COVID for something which was an endemic and systemic problem inside of that service, which was never properly funded. Now, they can blame the National Health Service for that, but this is a government-funded organization that has been underfunded. So what they should have been doing 20 years ago, 30 years ago, was funding that so it is the best service that the country can get. China has done the opposite. Now, it's actually, you have to pay for medical care in China, but the price is very, very reasonable. And a great example of that, there is a video on it by Lee Barrett, who got cancer and then got treatment. His entire treatment cost him 170 or 120,000 RMB, not dollars, not pounds. Now, had he been in the UK, he would have waited and possibly even got worse or possibly died. Had he been in America and uninsured, it would have cost him millions. So, China is very different. Now, in the UK, I believe what's happening now, yes, there are problems. Yes, it is a serious problem inside the UK, but it is not a new problem inside the National Health Service. It's a very old problem that is now being brought to the fore by the media. Now, this is populism. Now, there's a difference between populism and democracy. Populism is where the newspapers actually produce policy. The newspapers are directing policy. They're doing it with China. It's negative China. They're doing it now with the National Health Service. They're blaming the National Health Service. And so they're asking questions in the parliament. So the National Health Service are getting blamed. Now, personally, I expected this and I forecast this about 7 or 8 weeks ago when Rishi Sunak became the Prime Minister.
Right.
They are going to blame all the woes of Great Britain on the National Health Service inefficiencies. Once they have blamed them on the inefficiencies, they can start taking action to correct those inefficiencies. The best way to correct an inefficiency is to change the management. The best way to change the management, thank you, Kevin. The best way to change the management is to sell it. That's what Rishi Sunak is going to do. He's going to sell off the National Health Service. So all of this rhetoric about the National Health Service suddenly coming into the parliament is purely populism, and it's purely driven, in my opinion, so that we can lead up to the point where it can be sold off to American interests, which is there's sharks are around Australia and the UK. The American interests are floating around Medicare in Australia, National Health Service in the UK, and they are going to snap it up. Once they've snapped it up, Rishi Sunak can finish his term and he can go to America and he can sit on the boards as a billionaire. He'll finally make his first billion. That's why he became prime minister, in my opinion.
I mean, interesting observation. And, you know, that adds to my point and where I was kind of going with this about these healthcare systems. And NHS is one example, is that when they're not properly funded, ultimately, it's not the fault of the nurses or the doctors who are, you know, putting their time and energy into this. I mean, my sister's a lab tech on the line now. My sister was a lab technician during this COVID pandemic, and she was before that. And then it came to them making changes because the lab had to do a lot more COVID testing and stuff like that. And they were saying basically, how many hours can you work a week? And she says, well, I'm working full time now, but I can work extra. Well, we can't really afford that. That's not really in the unions thing. And she said, well, okay, I could take a more managerial position and some people could work under me. No, that's not possible because that's not within the, you know, collective bargaining agreement. And you see all these things, and then you start to hear stories of, here's two very interesting stories of my own family. My brother-in-law, he was rushed to the hospital, something with his gallbladder. I'm not sure quite what it was, but they said, head home, take some painkillers. We'll get you to see a doctor. Then you'll have to see a specialist, and then we'll put you on a list for operation. Now, that process can be anywhere from days to weeks to months. We don't know.
Yeah.
But the doctor said to him, if you want, it's pretty serious. We would basically say, you go to emergency and you stay in emergency, and then we will be obligated to operate on you. And that's exactly what he did. Here's
How long
a guy
did he wait in the emergency?
A few hours for sure. But it had, consequences. If it burst or something happened in his body, it could have been, catastrophic. But that was the only policy. I'll give you another thing is my mother's oxygen level dropped to an alarming rate. Okay. She was in one part visiting my sister in Canada. Well, the provincial Canada is made of provinces and territories. And she was in one province. Well, the Medicare didn't really cover out of province care. She had to come back to get it in her other province in order for it to be covered. And then they said, well, we think you need an oxygen machine. Well, her oxygen level dropped to 72. Okay. I'm surprised she's still with us, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And then they said, oh, yeah, this is alarming. And her doctor is, he went to the hospital and and it just shows you that how this system is so broken, so, fragmented. And when you see a doctor in Canada, they normally only say, tell us 2 problems. That's all the time that we are allotted. If you have 3 problems, you got to make another appointment to come back. And that's how it's billed. It's not the doctor's fault. It's not the nurse's fault. It's the building. It's how the government is working with the money. So after 90 days, now my mother is almost 80. Okay, she has COPD, and during COVID, COPD is not something that you want to go out and catch COVID. You're in big trouble.
And my father has that.
After 90 days, she gets her oxygen tested, and they said, yeah, okay, it's at a pretty adequate level. We're going to take away the oxygen machines from you now, and if your oxygen drops again, we will evaluate it. Well, that was 8 months ago. She had the oxygen. 3 months ago, her oxygen level dropped to 72. She had no tank. She had no oxygen. She had nothing. And she's at the mercy of some small town emergency room that didn't have an oxygen tank that could help her out. Some of these are very small communities in Canada. So when you see this happen and we start to understand why these death numbers climb, it's these real small isolated incidents that happen. Can you imagine? All you had to do is watch this documentary in New York in between March and May of 2020. It showed that they weren't ready. And Jerry, what I'm so shocked about is I was doing a live stream at the end of January and early February 2020 when China sent the warning shot to the world. Yeah. Look out, guys, it's coming. And you still saw football stadiums packed. Everyone's going, that can't pause.
That's the warning shot that China sent out on December the 31st. It was still 2019. Yeah. And then on January the 11th, sent the DNA to the World Health Organization and to the CDC, the US CDC. They sent these things out. And this is where even Donald Trump said, my friend Xi Jinping and China have done very well. They've been great. They've done a fantastic job of containing this and getting this information out to us. And then suddenly when people started to die in the US, it was China didn't tell us. China lied about it. China lies, people die. China lied, people died. No, it's completely the opposite. China did everything right. China identified a disease. China informed the world of that disease. China then identified the genome of the disease and informed the world of it on the January the 11th, 2020. That's a matter of historical record. What America, particularly America, which has had the largest death rate, but particularly what America did was abysmal. This idea, I remember watching, and I wanted to throw bricks at the screen because every morning I was getting up, and I'm retired, so I've got plenty of free time. Every morning I was getting up and I was watching Donald Trump and Deborah Bricks and Fauci standing on the podiums telling us that we don't need to wear masks. Masks are not required. We don't need to do this. Okay, so we don't need to wear masks. The problem was they didn't have masks. That was why they didn't need to wear them. So, but they knew what was happening. They knew everything that was going on. They had full information, full disclosure from China, and then they failed to act on that. So it really was an American fault. Now, Britain did the same thing. Britain, they did something really stupid, and they said, well, if anybody's got COVID, let's isolate them in these old people's homes, because they can be isolated. Well, this is exactly what happened. And guess what? They isolated people with COVID inside of old people's homes where they have central heating systems and all kinds. So you might have been in an isolated room in an old people's home with your COVID, but your COVID was not in an isolated room. It was getting around the system through the central heating and or the air conditioning or whatever it was that they have there. And people were dying. Literally, people in old people's homes were the greatest risk of dying at the beginning of COVID. It was just some stupid policies. Very stupid.
Yeah, I think a lot of these policies need to be, reviewed. When the vaccinations, or when the vaccine came out, Thailand, where I was living at the time, it was an absolute disaster. And still to this day, it was a disaster. And I'll tell you about this story, because this will really, and I think a few of you guys have heard this before, but first, when the vaccines came out, people were actually leaving Thailand, getting on an airplane and flying to North America to get vaccination.
Okay.
Because we were basically in a let it rip in Thailand. And then, and this is some criticism to the Thai, either the health authorities who was making this decision, but I heard the term "sorry, sir, Thai people only" was the first thing that came across my message when I was on the phone to the hospital. And I said, surely I don't want a free I'll pay for it. Whatever the cost is. Yes, let's pay for it. And no, that wasn't it. And they said, well, we can't help you. And I kept going around to many hospitals, and I signed up still to date. I'm on 6 waiting lists, registered waiting lists that the hospitals did have for international people to get a vaccination. And we are the 19th of December in 2022, and not one of those hospitals has returned.
You're still on the list.
Still on the list. Okay.
That's interesting because they chased me. In China, they chased me to get vaccinated. Right. But being over 60 years of age, I was one of the last to be vaccinated. They did it the opposite in the UK and Australia. They vaccinated old people first, vulnerable people, which is, I guess, fair. In China, they vaccinated young people first in exposed positions, taxi drivers, bus drivers, factory workers. They vaccinated the people they needed vaccinated to keep the country and the economy going. And then the last group of people to be vaccinated was the foreigners. And I got a message saying, you can now go for your vaccination. The system knows who I am. Yep. And so I got this message, you can go for your vaccination. Great. I went along there, you show things. And I had to pay 100 RMB. 100 RMB. That's $15 US, about £8.50 in the UK. And so I paid 100 RMB for my vaccination, and then 3 months later got a second one. They sent me a message, you're due for your second vaccination. It was the complete opposite, and I went along there. The first time I went was a massive queue, and it took about 40 minutes. massive queue. And I'm talking massive, hundreds, thousands of people were there. I mean, literally thousands of people. This was a football stadium full of people. And I took a couple of pictures of it. I should try and dig them out and send them to you if I've still got them. But yeah, it was a massive queue, massive queues. And they had us lined up in groups of 20 and then in different lines. And then we went through and I got pulled aside because they wanted to take my blood pressure. Everybody at this stage by now, almost everybody there is over 60. All the younger people have been done. And so I got taken aside. They wanted to take my blood pressure. There's no problem. But my brother-in-law, who's slightly older than me, was with me, and his blood pressure was a problem. I said, you can't have it. Your blood pressure's too high. So we waited 20 minutes, another blood pressure test. Can't have it, still too high. 20 more minutes, we'll try one more time. No, still too high. So I went off, I got my vaccination. He waited for me. We had to wait 30 minutes for the after effect. And there's a massive hall. I'm talking about literally 2,000 people an hour going through this place. It was that big. And so it was really well organized, and I was done. My brother-in-law went with my wife a few weeks later. Now, here's an interesting thing. My wife didn't get vaccinated with me. She was busy working in a hospital. She's a traditional Chinese medicine therapist. She does massage and acupuncture and things like that. And so she was working in a hospital and very busy. So nothing to do with COVID. She was just very busy in the hospital. And so she said, well, I need to go and get vaccinated. And they said, oh, she was doing an internship there. So she's 6 months doing it. They said, well, wait until after your internship because we're too busy to lose you for half a day. Okay, so she waited until after her. So she's working in a hospital without a vaccine.
Wow.
In the vulnerable place, and no mandates, and the requirement was the opposite. Oh, well, because people weren't worried about COVID. This was a year ago, and there was just no risk of COVID coming into the country at that stage. We went from, I think it was 13 months without anybody dying of COVID in China. And it was something I thought that the Chinese government might have put some kind of celebration out there. We've gone 12 months without a COVID death. They didn't. The way I view this is they're kind of modest or humble about this. And the last thing they'd want to do is to say to the rest of the world, look at what we've achieved, because the rest of the world would hate China even more. So they kept very quiet about that. But they went for 13 months without a COVID death. And then there was one, I think it was in Shenyang, actually, and someone might confirm that for me, but I think there was one death or two deaths in a very short period of time, both of them in Shenyang or in Jilin province, somewhere in Dongbei. And I think that was what kind of restarted it again. It was a different strain, and the Omicron came in, and it was more virulent but less pathogenic.
On to my story, just to continue on what I was talking about getting. Oh, no, it's good. I really enjoying this conversation. So basically, we were on our own. Everybody was on their own, and massive lockdowns. Couldn't get anybody on the phone. No clinics were answering. Phone lines were jammed. And I got an appointment with my embassy. And I went into the embassy and I said, look, I'm a Canadian here. What does the government get? What are we doing? I mean, the U.S. has brought in some for theirs. The Germans were vaccinating theirs. And the Chinese were actually vaccinating their entire population outside of China. And I said to my embassy, what can we do here? And they said, we can't do much for you. Go contact the Thai hospitals. I said, but I've done that.
Were they vaccinated? I actually saw the report. I don't know how true this is. I saw a report where there was a one particular country, and it was a small country, where the American government had actually sent 180 vaccines to a country. And then I thought to myself, I wonder how many staff and staff families there are of the American government in that country. So sorry, continue.
So yeah, I was seeing, Thais getting vaccinated, and of course, they looked at us too. They thought that this was a foreigner brought in, thing, and they would walk on the other side of the streets. It was a tense time there. The Thai people are most generally very, very polite and very nice people.
I know, yeah.
But during this time, it was really unsettling because, these were very strong variants going around in the country. There was no measure. There was no contact tracing apps. I mean, the contact tracing app that is there was an absolute joke. You wrote a phone number before you went into the grocery store and something like that. So I knew that, oh boy. And I was then notified about coming to Chongqing to collaborate with these guys at Chongqing. And I said, well, okay. I said to my wife, here's the goal. The goal is, if I can't be safe in this bloody country, we're going to do everything we can. We're moving to China.
Yeah.
Because we had just visited Chongqing 2 weeks before the pandemic started. So I got a nice letter from the lady here in the office.
Catherine.
And yes, Catherine. And I always remember my father saying something. I lost my father about 20 some years ago to cancer, and he always would give me this great advice. He would say to me, walk in like you own the place. I said, okay. So I decided maybe this strategy would work, because if I got on an airplane and I flew to the United States, there would be a possibility that I could maybe get a vaccination, but then I would come back and I would face a 2 to 3 week, because we've got to remember, my homes are in Thailand still to this day. My property is there. My livelihood is there. Most of it was there. So I had a choice, sacrifice maybe not ever getting back to my home in Thailand, because I could be cut off. You don't know what these governments are going to do. And if I risked it, went back, if I came back, am I allowed? Because at the time, Thailand didn't really have the quarantine going on. It was kind of like, no, you're not coming in.
Right.
So it's like, oh boy, there's your home, there's your computers, there's your safety deposit box, your bank accounts, your telephones, everything, your family. That ain't going to work. Then Canada put in restrictions. Now, if you come home, you're going to, I think it was like $4,000 or $5,000 just to stay in a hotel. And then, okay, so all these things are going on. My wife's Lithuanian. She was not allowed to come to Canada with me.
Oh.
Okay. So I said, it looks like every country is on its own here. What can I do? Well, I saw this posting online, and it said, if you are a Chinese national, come to this hospital, this date, this time. We are here to vaccinate you. And this is the Chinese government. You can register at the Chinese embassy in Thailand. I walked into that hospital and I said,
I own the place.
I went up and I showed a lady the letter, the security guard. He didn't speak Chinese. He just saw the letter. He just kind of pointed upstairs. And I went upstairs, and this lady came out who was running this whole organization. And she says, listen, I've read your letter. I understand that you want to come to China. And actually, it's a prerequisite that you need the Sinovac vaccination before you go. And she says, unfortunately, I've called the embassy, and she says, your name isn't there. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do. And I said, oh, okay. And she says, if there is a cancellation or somebody that doesn't come, are you available? And I said, sunshine kind of shone down on me. And I thought, okay, there's a ray of hope. Maybe there's a ray of hope here. After 4 months, Jerry, of going to every hospital saying, please order it. Some hospitals were taking, I think, a $400 deposit so that you could pre-order it from America. And then when it was just, the rule book was thrown out. I lived through this experience. It was absolutely crazy. So the lady said, I'm really sorry. And she said, let me add you to WeChat. I said, okay. I went home with my wife and I thought, it looks like I'm not going to get into China. It's impossible. I'm stuck. And waking up into this really locked down city and all of the businesses are just decimated. It was probably one of the most depressing things I've ever seen, walking down streets that were just empty and all these businesses. And remember, Thailand is built on a lot of these mom and pop businesses. These were decimated to the wall. Well, the next morning I woke up and I saw a message on my phone that says, can you be here at 4:30 to 4:45? If you can, we have a vaccination for you. Well, I walked into the living room and said to my wife, look at this. And she just said, isn't this unbelievable that the Thai government, the Canadian government, all these people that you've reached out to in the last 4 months couldn't do anything. And isn't it amazing that there's going to be a Chinese vaccination going into your body that gives you reassurance and safety in a very traumatic time? Now, people watching this might now say, oh, okay, that's very dramatical, Alex. What are you talking about? Sorry. This was in the middle of a peak pandemic in Thailand when you're on your own, when you're seeing people dying. I went to the hospital. I was very emotional about it. The lady was absolutely amazing. I got the vaccination of some people are for vaccinations, against vaccinated. I'm a person that wanted to be vaccinated. Okay. I just did. And I felt walking out and she came into me and she says, is your wife going to be joining you in China? I said, well, yes, of course. And she says, well, if we find another cancellation, it might not be this week or next week or whatever, we will call her. And sure enough, 10 to 14 days later, my wife got a call to be there. And that moment, I will never forget that woman and what this country has done. And it shows, here's a country that is continually dragged through the media.
Yes.
And
all the things that you hear about China, everything you hear about China, once you know China, you realize, oh gosh, how misled have I been about this country? And we all are until we get here, until something like that happens to you. And they helped you, they helped your wife. I remember the story of how hard it was to get your wife into China. And I can't imagine going through that. I mean, my wife is Chinese, and it's great that I have that. But I actually have the opposite story to you. I left China and went to Thailand.
Okay.
This is not a well-known story. Right at the beginning of the pandemic, nobody knew what was going on. It was
Kurt Guelo 60.
He went to Canada, right?
Well, he got stuck in Thailand at my apartment for 5 months. For 5 months.
Oh, right. Okay. No, well, I was a slightly different situation. I went to, it was before lockdown. We had a close down inside of China, the Wuhan thing in January, February 2020. I turned 60 in 2018. When you turn 60 in China, you lose the ability to work on a proper visa, a working visa, unless you've got some special qualifications. And I've got a master's degree, but it's not special enough. PhDs, maybe Nobel Prizes, Olympic medals, that sort of thing. But you've really got to have the right job and the right conditions to continue working beyond 60. And I'm just a normal guy. So I turned 60, and for a couple of years I hadn't worked. And then I've got a very good friend who I used to work with who's working in Thailand. And he and I worked together. We were both educators. We were both IELTS examiners here. And he was working in Thailand in a university. And he said, there's jobs going here. And I've put a word in for you. You can come down here and get a job for a couple of years. And I thought, this is great. Now, this was all planned before COVID even started. And then during the Chinese New Year here, we had these lockdowns locally. And so I flew to Thailand and I spent, I was there for 3 weeks. But I arrived in Thailand, I think it was late February or early March. So it would have been late February, the last couple of days of February. And you could probably Google this. The day the first person in Thailand died of COVID was the day that I arrived. And of course, I arrived there with my resume. I've got my suit and I've got a tie and I'm ready to go for a job interview. And I contact my friend and say, yeah, I'm arriving. I'm here. And I'm at this particular hotel. He said, I've got bad news for you, mate. Sorry. They're not going to interview anybody from China. You're done.
Oh.
It's not going to happen. So I've just arrived and I was there for a total of 3 weeks. I took my resume into a dozen different, because I'm just a teacher. I'm quite happy to go back to being a standard ESL teacher, English as a second language teacher, even though I'm highly trained in training, teacher training, IELTS exam, and that kind of thing. I would have taken any job as just an ordinary teacher. And the fact was, nobody could look at me. You're from China. Sorry, mate. Anyway, I remember walking into one of these all-day bars for an English breakfast, meeting another friend there, another former examiner, actually. And he was on holiday there, and we'd arranged to meet. We were staying in a hotel very near each other. We met for breakfast, and I walked in wearing a mask, and the girl said to me, you don't need to wear a mask here. And I said, I've just come from China. Oh, she stepped back and said, okay, that table over there. Sent me over to the furthest table. And so I sat there on my own, took the mask off, had my breakfast, and then left. We met up, and I was looking for a job for 2 weeks. I have another friend from the UK. I went to stay with him at a place which is 2 hours drive south of Bangkok. I'm not sure of the name of the place now. And so then I decided this is not going to work. I'm just having a holiday here. I need to get back to China because there was talk that China would close down. I got a flight. It got cancelled. I got a flight the next day. It was okay. I got on the plane. The airport, like you said, was deserted, completely deserted. And I got on the plane. There's 200 or 300 people on the plane. Got off the plane and went into a system which I've never seen the like of before. I'd never seen so many people wearing hazmat suits. And I thought, what the hell am I into here? And for 17 hours, I was in the Hong Kong, the Zhuhai border crossing, where you take the road from Hong Kong airport. For 17 hours, I was in that processing area. And they finally took me at 5 o'clock in the morning to a hotel. I fell asleep. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. Get downstairs immediately. Hurry downstairs now. So I jumped out of bed. I hadn't unpacked anything. Straight downstairs. Saw that someone had left me some breakfast, and missed that. And they said, you're going to Zhongshan, which is the city I live in. So, okay, great. So they took me to Zhongshan and put me in a hotel, but I didn't get into that hotel until after midday. Now, I got off a plane at 5 o'clock the day before, and we're now at midday the next day, and I hadn't eaten anything. So, okay, I started to feel a little hungry. They put me in this hotel room, and I said, can I get something to eat? No, not until 6 p.m. So, okay. I was very patient about it all. And I said, how long am I staying here? And one guy said until 1 o'clock, but it was already 2 o'clock. Another person said, you're here until I tell you that you can go. And I said, well, how long will that be? And they said, we don't know. Another person said about 3 days. And the hotel receptionist who gave me the key said, you'll be here for 2 weeks. Okay. So I went in, and I was now in the quarantine system. And at 6 p.m., I got a phone call in the room. Get downstairs now. Bring your bags. You're going home. So, what? Going home? Yeah. And so I went downstairs, and there was a lady there from my local community. And she said, I'm here to take you home. You can isolate at home. So, oh, this is great. And she said, this is my motorbike. I've got a suitcase. I was planning a year in Thailand. I've got a suitcase which is this big and weighs 20 kilos on the motorbike. And she, oh, okay, so what should we do here? And I said, well, I know my wife is with a friend who has a car. Maybe we can put the bag in the car and they can take that home. Okay, give her a call. So we called my wife, and she came with the friend. He put his bag in my car, and I got into the back of the car and got taken home. This is my quarantine. This is what quarantine was in those days. And I still hadn't eaten. It's now 6 p.m. I've missed lunch. I've missed dinner. I hadn't eaten at all, and she bought me a packet of instant noodles. She was so kind. It was a packet of instant noodles, and I came home and I ate my instant noodles at 6 p.m. and they closed the door. She said, "We'll come and see you tomorrow." My wife, who actually lives here in the apartment, had to go somewhere else because we weren't allowed to quarantine together. So we're fortunate because we actually have 2 apartments and the other one is empty. So she went to stay at the. Actually, it wasn't. She had a tenant in there, but the tenant was her best friend. So she went and stayed with her best friend for a couple of weeks, and they were bringing me food every day. I had food in the freezer, and that was my welcome home. So I had 2 weeks of quarantine in my own apartment. And then about 4 or 5 days later, another friend of mine came in from the UK. On the same day, actually, I met up with a friend of mine from the UK who'd come in as well. And he was put into an apartment that his company owned. And my other friend got put into a hotel and he wanted to go home. And they said, no, all quarantines are now in hotels. And that was when it was changing. So it was still a very fluid situation. But it was a fantastic experience for me. It gave me something to write about. And it actually started my writing career because I wrote 2 articles, one about the process of coming through the check-in, the 17 hours inside of the airport. And then I wrote another article about my 2 weeks of quarantine. And both of them got published by Guangdong newspaper. And so after that, I started writing articles. And that's how I became who I am and what I am now. It was quite an interesting process. If it hadn't happened, if I hadn't gone to Thailand, I don't know what I'd be doing now. I certainly wouldn't be who I am. Or I would be who I am, but I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So that was interesting.
Jerry, it's been quite the chat today, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's been
even doing it when you're under the weather. But
actually, I feel great. I highly recommend people get this stuff for the pain and get this stuff to make you feel good. Somebody else put up there. I saw someone putting the name of this stuff, Liang.
Oh, fantastic!
It is good stuff, and it does help. Somebody asked the question: did you have any side effects from the vaccination?
Oh yeah,
none whatsoever. Not even an irritation around the site. Nothing. It was like, oh, I've been vaccinated. It's done. It wasn't. There's nothing. Not a thing. It was perfect.
Yeah, there's the question there.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, no, nothing at all. I had it's called the Vera or the Vero, Sinovac, I think, and I've had all 3. I've had the booster as well, and I've had no issues with that at all.
Here's one last question. Did they prescribe any antiviral medication?
The truth is nobody's prescribed anything for us because we haven't seen a doctor. So, I mean, my wife is in contact with our local community. They're very, very good. This is one of the things about China. You register with your local police station. Your local community knows who you are. And the truth is storytelling takes your mind off the pain. No, this takes your mind off the pain. Storytelling just kills the time. The local community are really good. They've told us that we need to stay at home, but if there's anything we need to let them know. They've told us that, and we can get deliveries made. There's no problems with that. They've told us that on the 21st and 22nd, we need to take another of these antigen tests. And if we're negative, we're okay. If we're positive, I mean, if you want, I can take one now. I've got enough tests. Would you like a live test?
So we'll see what they say.
TCM is good. Yeah, TCM is good.
Some people are saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to show what you get in one of these things. There's a little container there. There's a swab. Everything comes. Everything you need. This is really interesting. They give you this, which is a bag for disposal. Now, one of the things I have a little concern about is the overall disposal. If I just put everything into my local rubbish bin, I don't know what happens to it. And I've just dropped something on the floor, which is the important bit, and that's the stuff. I don't know what that is, but if you put that, when you break off the nib here, you put that into there, And then when you've had this up your nose for a little while, you put the swab part into there, move it around a little bit, and then you drip into, I'm going to open this. You drip the stuff into there, and then about a few minutes later, and it says wait 15 minutes. In my case, it went up in about 30 seconds. The color changes there, and you get two lines. One is the test line, and one is the COVID line. So if you've got two lines, then you're COVID positive.
I think we're ready, Jerry. I think we're ready for you to do it.
You want me to do it?
Let's go.
Okay.
Now is the thing that you put up? When I had when I came to Shanghai at the airport, when they put it up my nose, that really hurt. But these brushes are much milder, aren't they?
Well, I'm doing it myself, so I won't hurt myself. Hang on. I don't know how to get this open. There's a challenge. There's the first challenge, getting the damn thing open. Yeah, because I did this myself, and I can tell you it's not comfortable. The throat ones are okay. I didn't see any major problems with that, so I'll do that. I'm going to crack open the seal, as they say. Oh, God. The seal is cracked.
Okay.
Okay, now we put... The test liquid is now inside of the container. Okay, I should probably just do a little bit of this. Now, just to prove it is up there. And then you're supposed to move it around 4 times. Yeah, that's not very comfortable. So that's done. Now I'm going up the other one, and I'm going to move. This is like... Sorry, this is like Chinese people.
You're doing well live.
Picking their teeth. Great. Yeah, I bet this hasn't been done before. No. Okay, so that's it. Now, move that around. It's because I did this the other day and I checked the system. Move that around, and then it says squeeze it off as you pull it out. Now that's done. That's done. I'm putting everything into a safe container here. Now, all I need to do now is to take this and to put this onto here. Now, this will probably get you 1 million views, or it ought to. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that was a squeeze. 4 drops.
Okay.
Okay. So Now, I can't show you this because it has to be balanced. I'm sorry. The color is
great. You're doing great. You're doing great.
The color is changing from white to purple. I can see that. Now, hang on, wait. I can do this.
Wu Jiao said the drum roll is needed, though.
That's it. Can you see the color changing?
Yeah, I can see it. You mean that gray on the bottom there? It's kind of grayish.
Yeah, it's become gray.
Yeah.
It's actually purplish for me. The interesting thing is the first line hasn't appeared yet, which it did the other day. So this may mean that I'm now through my COVID. It says it takes up to 15 minutes. So I hope you've got something else to talk about for the next few minutes.
Problem.
Because let's come back, because that's not doing anything very spectacular right now. I'll keep an eye on it while we're talking. We were going to finish, and now we've got to wait 15 minutes.
Now, when was your first test? When was the first test? When did you take your first test?
Gosh, you mean for this particular bout of COVID?
Yeah.
3 days ago, I think.
3 days ago? Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think you had symptoms before that? A couple of days ago?
I know I had COVID. My wife and I both tested on Thursday. She was positive, I was negative. Then we came home. So Friday, it wasn't Friday, so it was Saturday. Saturday, I had my first test. Oh. Hang on. Can you see 2 lines forming?
Let me just take this off the screen here. Yeah, I can see 2 lines forming now. Yeah.
I'm still COVID positive.
Okay.
So, yeah, if there's 2 lines there, then it's COVID positive. Now it'll take 15 minutes. These 2 lines are closer together, I think, than the last 2. I don't know if that means anything at all, but 2 lines is definitely COVID positive. They've got all the instructions here and it tells you what.
Do you know what the cost of those are for just an average person if they wanted to buy them, you think, locally?
Very cheap in China anyway. One of the things that I probably should say about China is that they do not price gouge. And when people do and get caught, then it's very severe punishments for them. And people do, but it's very rare. Because there was a pharmacy in Beijing right in the early time that started selling 35 RMB boxes of masks for 350 RMB. My son takes every day. Wow. How much does it cost? Perhaps someone else can tell us, because we got these donated. And in fact, I'm fairly certain that these are donated from a company that's exporting, because everything is in English. Even all the instruction sheet is all in English.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good news.
Someone says it doesn't need, well, it's good news for me. Someone says it doesn't need 15 minutes. Yeah. And that's it. You can clearly see 2 lines now. So I am still COVID positive. Now I have to tidy all that up in a minute. Yeah,
well, thank you for sharing that experience with us. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, it's not a nice feeling, but it's got to be done.
I can understand.
Every day before school, that's terrible. So has anyone put the price up there? Because I don't know what these cost, but they're really not cheap.
Yeah,
that pharmacy.
I would say probably I took one at a eye hospital before I went in. They charged me 6. So maybe it's 6. So maybe it's even less retail. Maybe it's 3. I don't know.
I would guess that this is more than that, because it's a home kit. When they're doing the mass testing, it's quite cheap to do.
But this was one like yours. This was the same thing as yours. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's really cheap then. Yeah.
So maybe that was subsidized as well.
Possible,
but anyway,
possible.
Yeah,
but yeah, I know they're not expensive. I know the problem is that they're hard to get right now.
Yeah.
We tried to pick some up on the day that we walked to our test. We tried to pick some up. In fact, we went. One of us stayed outside. One of us went into the pharmacy to ask for them, with a view to try and minimize our exposure, because we both felt that we were in a contagious state and we didn't really want to be out there. But I think that's what's happened now. And do you remember what I said earlier on? I think they misstepped. They misstepped a few things. And I think one of the missteps was that they didn't make the early announcement, this is what we're going to do. So in order to prepare, do this. Now, in all honesty, what we should have done, if we had the chance, we would have bought maybe 4 rapid antigen tests, 2 to take that day, 2 to take a week later. But
fever medication.
That's all we needed. Yeah. So every single panel from the Health say once China, they will suggest that mRNA vaccines will reduce the death rate. Well, I think proof positive will come in the next few weeks. What China has done is right or wrong. There's no point in speculating. There's no point in speculating about it. I'm quite confident China has done it right. I'm quite confident.
Let's hope so for everybody. And of course, it's going to be some interesting weeks here, and we'll probably be back on this screen in a week or so. I'd invite you back onto the program, and we'll see. Hopefully, you're going to be much better, and you can show us the negative test. Of course, you'll be better by then. I think you got through the tough part. But
it wasn't as bad as expected. That's for sure. I can say that without a shadow of a doubt.
Let's just hope for everyone that we can get through this difficult next few weeks here and see some brighter days ahead. I'm going to leave the audience to chat with themselves. Jerry, what a pleasure it is to have you on the program once again. For everyone that's not aware of Jerry's channel, Jerry's Take on China, you can see we put the list in the comment box on the side there. You can see it. Did you scroll up? You can get his links there as well. And after I'm done with the show, I'll go back into the description and put your link in there as well, Jerry. I appreciate you coming on the program. Get well, sir. Please don't stress too much. Thanks for the live rapid antigen test for our viewers. Very educational part there. And thanks to Wu Jiao, who somebody said yesterday, somebody said I sound better from the apartment stream yesterday. When I was in my apartment, I was in one of my new apartments. I don't have the heating on in that apartment at all yet. So Yuli and I were there and we did a live stream. And when you can see your breath and how cold it is, you get the sniffles in that apartment. So I didn't feel bad anyway. Just saying that all is good here and negative. So yes, don't forget to also subscribe to Wu Jiao's channel. Any last words, Jerry?
If you can avoid this, there it is. Hang on, there. 2 lines, definitely. If you can avoid this, I would do so for as long as possible. If you can't avoid it, I hope that your symptoms are like mine, very mild. There's been a few things uncomfortable, but the idea that this is going to be so serious is certainly out of my head now. It's just something I'm glad it's over. I'm glad it's done with. I hope that everybody else gets it as mildly as I've got it. My wife has been the same as me until this morning, and she's not well this morning. So hopefully she gets better later today. And good luck to everyone in China. And if you're not in China, good luck to you too, I guess.
Okay, everyone. Well, thanks again. I'm Alex at iChongqing, and we'll put a bit of music on here for you guys, and you can chat with each other. We're not going to, end it right away and not allow you guys to say goodbye. So here it is. Anyway, cheers from Chongqing.
Nice music.
Thanks,
and
guys.
Cheers from Zhongshan.
Bye.